They are devils who have no human heart, so I only want a death sentence. That's why I'll do whatever I can." This is what the mother of Rie Isogai said about the people that brutally murdered her daughter in 2004. Using the dark web, they planned their terrible crime. This is the story of the kidnapping, theft, and murder of Rie Isogai, who fought until the end and left her murderers with a surprise that they would never forget. In 2007, there was a private underground site on the dark web called Dark Employment Security Office. This was an underground bulletin board site that many people used to discuss, recruit, and plan for crimes. On August 17, 2007, from the intimidating depths of the dark web, an ominous message appeared. The message read, "I'm out of prison and living in my van. I'm looking for a partner in crime. Would anyone like to work with me?" It was Kenji Kawagishi, a 40-year-old unemployed man, who posted this message. It was this message that led to the meeting up of 3 strangers to carry out a plan which ended in the death of Rie Isogai. Kenji Kawagishi, also known as Kenji, wasn't your usual upright citizen. He was bullied as a child and eventually turned into a criminal. After a few minor convictions, he eventually started using the dark web in August 1999 to buy, open, and sell bank accounts so they could be used for fraud. Even while this gave his family additional money, his spending habits quickly outpaced this additional revenue, and by 2002, tax evasion and unpaid mortgage payments had finally resulted in the seizure of his flat. After this, Kenji spent several years in and out of jail due to fraud convictions. He kept using the dark web in spite of these accusations. In 2007, he had recently been released from prison for yet another round of fraudulent conduct when he posted his statement on the dark web. 2 men replied and were interested to meet up and try to rob people. Like Kenji, Tsukasa Kanda was 36 years old and had a difficult past. Tsukasa was mistreated by his father, bullied at school, and suffered from persistent migraines. Because of this unstable and dangerous environment, he joined neighborhood gangs and committed small-time crimes. By the time Kenji posted the message to the dark web, Tsukasa's financial situation was miserable and he was in deep debt. Because he earned so little, he depended on the weekly allowance he received from his girlfriend, but he could no longer put up with this. He was desperately looking for a way out of it. That's why, after being found guilty of fraud in 1997, he started using the dark web. Yoshitomo Hori, a 32-year-old dart player, replied to the message as well. Like Tsukasa, Yoshitomo was in deep debt. He owed more than 4 million yen, the equivalent of $30,000, even though he had no past criminal record. On August 21, 2007, the 3 got together at Yoshitomo's house. It was at this point that they started to devise a cunning plan to profit. A number of schemes, including pickpocketing, kidnapping, and even a theft against a pachinko parlor, a Japanese casino, were included in their drafts. At first, they met with only the plan of robbing others. After multiple robbery attempts failed, the 3 men then met in a parking lot to think of a new way to get money. It seems that the 3 men were failing in their objectives, and with that came despair and dissatisfaction. That's when Kanda recommended abducting a woman and forcing her to give them her money. Hori and Kawagishi liked the plan, as it would be easy for 3 men to overpower a woman. Sadly, after they upped their ante, the devious plans would have some extremely terrifying repercussions the very following day. It was the evening of August 24, 2007, and like any other day, Rie Isogai tried to call her boyfriend as she was walking home from work. Usually, these calls made her feel safe in the big city. Unfortunately, her boyfriend didn't pick up the phone. This turned out to be her last call to anyone. Because on that same evening, the 3 men drove around the area looking for women who were walking alone. They drove around for almost 3 hours before they spotted Rie around 10 p.m. She was just 100 meters or about 300 feet from her home when they approached. As she was walking, Hori got out of the van and approached her, asking for directions. When she stopped to help, the 3 men forced her into the van. Once inside the van, they handcuffed her and threatened her with knives, demanding she give them her money and ATM card. Kawagishi drove his van to a parking lot in the outer areas of Nagoya, where it was much quieter and no one was around to hear her scream. At first, Rie refused to give up her ATM code, but after continuous threats and beatings, Rie told the three men her PIN was 2960. Once they had her PIN, Kawagishi tried to sexually assault Rie, but the other two intervened. During the confrontation, Rie tried to escape the van, but the men managed to prevent her from escaping. Kanda placed a bag over her head and wrapped packing tape around her head to smother her. Finding it was taking too long, he took a hammer and started hitting her over the head, while the other two, Hori and Kawagishi, started choking her with a rope. The blows from the hammer and the strangling with the rope ultimately proved fatal to Rie. After Rie had died, they drove to a forested area in Gifu Prefecture and dumped her body around 4 a.m. on the 25th of August. They split the money they found in her purse, but this converted to only $600 and was not nearly enough for the three greedy men. Therefore, they decided to drive straight to an ATM to raid Rie's bank account. This is where they found out that the PIN given to them by the now deceased Rie did not work. The numbers Rie had passed on to the men turned out to be a well-thought-out move with a hint to a number game Rie was obsessed with. In this game, numbers represent words, and in Japanese, the number 2960 reads Niku wa, which means I hate you. Until her dying moment, she had refused to give anything to the men and foiled their robbery attempt. Disappointed that their robbery had yielded far less than hoped, the three men decided to meet again the next evening to rob other women. But before the time came, Kawagishi could no longer live with his guilt. He called the police and confessed to everything they had done that night. He described the crime in detail and told the police where to find Rie's body. In Japan, the death penalty is waived if a criminal surrenders to police before being identified as a suspect. This was Kawagishi's biggest motivation. Using the information from Kawagishi, the police found Rie's body. Shortly after Rie's mother identified her daughter's lifeless body, the police were able to track down the remaining two men. All three men were arrested and charged with robbery, murder, kidnapping, confinement, and abandonment of a corpse. Kawagishi was also charged with attempted rape. Before the trial even began, Rie's mother started a petition asking for the death penalty for all three men. This petition ended up getting over 300,000 signatures. Usually, in single murder cases, the death penalty is not sought, but because of the petition, growing support by Japanese people for capital punishment, and the case's connection with the dark web, prosecutors asked for the death penalty. Even the fathers of Kanda and Kawagishi asked the court to sentence their sons to death. The trial began in September 2008. All three pled guilty to robbing and murdering Rie Isogai. However, during the trial, each defendant blamed the other for being the mastermind and coming up with the idea to murder Rie. Kawagishi told the court that Kanda was the leader and had originally planned to kill Rie. Hori also claimed Kanda was the leader, and until Kanda started suffocating Rie, he had not intended to kill the victim. Kanda claimed all three had agreed to search for a woman, rob her, and then kill her from the get-go. In the closing arguments, the prosecutors demanded the death penalty for all three, including Kawagishi, despite his confession. Claiming he showed little remorse for the murder and only confessed to lessen his sentence, he deserved the same punishment as the others. But the defense claimed that without Kawagishi telling police where Rie's body was and who the other two culprits were, the case might never have been solved. Finally, on March 18, 2009, all three were found guilty of the murder of Rie Isogai. Kanda and Hori were sentenced to death. Kawagishi, however, was sentenced to life in prison. Kanda's lawyer appealed the decision, but Kanda withdrew the appeal and was executed in June of 2015. Hori also appealed to the High Court of Nagoya, and in April of 2011, his sentence was reduced to life in prison, as the court found that both Kawagishi and Hori were being led by Kanda. In a surprising turn of events, it was found that Hori had actually robbed and killed a couple in 1998 and was once again sentenced to death. His death sentence was finalized in July of 2019.